Well, 7 o'clock, so we're gonna get started. This is the March 8th, 2022 meeting of the Short-Term Rental Committee, Subcommittee. It is now 7:01 in the evening. We're gonna do a roll call for attendance. I'm gonna call out your name and just tell me if you are present or not, or if you are not present. Let's see, Randy Brad, I am here. Doug Moglen.
Present.
Kyle Scott.
Present.
Russ Anderson.
Present.
Tom Fitzgerald.
Present.
Dick Utzinger.
Here.
Pat Odiorn.
Here.
And Rhett Banish is not here. Okay, we're gonna start off with public comments. Anybody from the public have any comments for this evening before we start a meeting? Nothing in the meeting.
Yes. Hello.
Anything?
There's Marcus.
You could turn that on.
You know what? It sounds like it's not coming out of the. Randy, can't hear you.
Can you hear me, Randy? Oh. What's going on?
Andy, can you unmute all?
Richard, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm sorry. I had you on mute for a minute.
Yeah.
Well, I had to. Sorry.
Oh, well, I don't know what's happening there. Town Hall. Looks like they're frozen. Oh,
Moving, but can't hear him.
sign language.
Guys, can you hear us at all?
We can
I
hear
hear,
you.
I hear
Oh,
Megan.
got you.
Can hear you.
I think we got you now. It looks like the owl is muted from the screen.
You should be able to
Okay.
hear.
Copy, we got you. 10-4.
All right, we are still in public comment. Marcus, were you gonna have something to say?
Yes, Marcus Phelps, 28 Depot Street. I had a couple comments for the subcommittee regarding the bylaw draft you may develop. One of the items, I think the bylaw should include a requirement that short-term rentals can only be in single-family homes. Only in single-family homes. Which means apartments, so forth, could not be rented or a rental, short-term rental. The second item is the home where the short-term rental is must be owner occupied. So that way someone can't buy a house and make it into a short-term rental continuously. It could be, I mean, continuous, but they have to be present. So it should be owner occupied. So that's it. 2 comments.
Thank
So
you, Mark.
Marcus, you're saying if somebody has a home with an in-law apartment, they can't lease it to somebody else that's not family?
Yes, they can. It's a single family home with an in-law apartment. As long as they are occupying the house, they could
Okay.
have that part as an Airbnb or short-term rental, sorry.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Raise your hand or speak up. Okay, moving on. First item is policy discussion. So at our last meeting, we had talked about what other communities have been doing, as well as what the town has been doing about this issue. There are a few documents that I submitted last week with the agenda. The first was a memo from Bacon Wilson dated February 25th, 2019, titled Massachusetts Short-Term Regulations. This was shortly after the Mass General Law, where the town got this opinion from Bacon Wilson. I think this is a pretty good document, kind of explain the policy, explain what chapters that were modified and which those that may be applicable to the town. I also passed along some Mass General laws, specifically Chapter 64G, which I think is the kind of the meat potatoes of the policy. I passed along some other town bylaws and policies, and as well as a frequently asked questions document from the Division of Local Services. I think it may be worthwhile just kind of go through these documents one at a time and maybe go over some of the highlights. Does everybody have these in front of them, or have they looked at them? I see, yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
The first document from Bacon Wilson explains the change in Mass General Law. And it explained which chapters were modified and which may be applicable to the town. So this is kind of like the first, kind of direction sign where to move forward. Oh, thank you, Doug. If we are going to continue this discussion here. I think Chapter 64G, which was starred in this document here, has the most information I think would be applicable for our discussions later on. I think a lot of the other information is actually within the document itself, the Chapter 64G document, which we'll go over. Any comments on this document from the committee?
No.
If there's 4 or more rooms are rented, it's gonna be, if somebody else is living in a house, it's gonna be a pretty good sized house, I would think. And what are we calling it? Are we talking bedrooms, living rooms, or how about if the homeowner shares the house with the people?
I don't understand, Dick. What do you mean by four bedrooms?
Well, it says your bed and breakfast establishment, private owner occupied home where 4 or more rooms are rented. So, obviously, so can rent more than 4 or cannot rent more than 4, or what, what's you saying?
I think it means that more than 4 becomes a bed and breakfast. I think that's.
Which is different than this policy.
Yeah, this is just,
We are not a bed and breakfast.
this is just definitions.
Yeah,
Okay,
looking at here, just definitions of what may be helpful as you read through the regulations.
thank you.
Yeah, when we get to the MGL 64G, there are some definitions that I think are helpful for us as we go forward. So anything else on this document here?
It kind of sets up what's in your sample bylaws that you give.
Yeah. There are some things that could be considered, such as a local excise tax. That's under section 3A here that we're looking at on the screen. That's something that would probably have to be approved by a town meeting. And as well as community impact fees. So I don't think we have either excise taxes or impact fees in town, do we, Doug?
I don't believe so.
For any use? I'm not aware of that either. And let's see here. I think let's go on to the next document, which let's look at Chapter 64G, which is the room occupancy excise. At our last meeting, we did talk about the definition of a, or how many days constituted a short-term rental. And if you look under the housing, the occupancy definition, it does say that a short-term rental, the very last page of the second, very last line of the second document, short-term rental normally used for sleeping living purposes for a period of not more than 31 consecutive calendar days. So that is a short-term rental. Now, I know the discussion in the last meeting, what number of days that would qualify. So, as we continue going through this document here, it basically gives the town the ability to adopt these codes and impose some excise fees if deemed necessary for that use. Any comments from the board?
Who enforces these codes?
That's a good question. I don't think it's specified in the Mass General Law. That's something that, as a community, we would have to identify who the enforcing authority is.
Okay.
I think in other bylaws, it's a mix of either the building inspector or police department that does most of the enforcement. Let's see here. If you go on to further in past the definitions document, there's 64G, section 3A, local excise tax, information concerning amount collected available. So again, this is regarding the ability to administer an excise tax of not more than 6% of the total amount of rent, or maybe 6.5%. And then if you go on to the next section, 64G, section 3D, there are community impact fees that would be imposed in the same manner as the excise tax. One thing about these two fees is that it would not be paid directly to the town. They would be paid to the state through their means, and then it would be distributed to the municipality from the state.
I think that's taken on the model that they used for Uber and Lyft. Those fees are paid to the state and then redistributed to the towns based on self-reporting by the rideshare firm of the number of rides that they started or stopped in each community. And then they sent us a check.
This state's building commissioner will review complaints. On one side, page 5 of draft chapter. It's Fairhaven.
Oh, that's a Fairhaven. That's there's, yeah, that's in Fairhaven.
Hmm.
Yeah, was there. And then the last document here in chapter 64G, section 14 was regulation of operators by cities or towns. So that's what gives the town the ability to establish the regulation or bylaw that we are discussing at this time. Anything else on
Randy, I
that?
believe you mentioned, oh, sorry, Randy, I believe you mentioned to me the other day that anybody that rents a room has to be registered with the town. Is that correct?
That is, they have to be registered through the state.
Okay,
And then that is in the Mass General Law, and I believe the town could probably have its own separate regulation through our own regulatory mechanism.
That's whoever's
Right there.
renting a room, not who, I should say, whoever has a building that they're renting a room out, not the person that's actually renting. That's on the log for the facility. Right?
Yes,
So I read
yeah,
that right.
the owner is responsible
Right.
for that. Yeah.
okay.
And that's right on this section. Title 14, section 14. It's right at the bottom of the page, require the licensing and registration of operators within the city.
Okay.
And the city or town may accept a certificate of registration in lieu of requiring the operator to obtain a local license or issue a provisional license.
Okay, so that was that document. And then let's look at this DLS document. This is regarding excise taxes. And this is actually kind of a nice document. This is kind of geared towards the municipality and what actions would be required by the town to implement the excise tax. And so we do not have an excise tax. I did check with Michelle Hill, our town clerk treasurer. But if you scroll to the bottom of this document, first page there, Doug, my town does not have a local excise option. How do we adopt it? And it's specified here. Don't go too far, first page. Here we go. So this tells you basically require a vote by town meeting, essentially. So if we continue down this path, this is one issue we would have to discuss, is whether we want to adopt a local excise tax. Any questions on this document?
No.
And then also we provided some policies from other towns. I don't know if we need to go into those at this point, but I think it's probably discussion, where's everyone, where's everyone feeling about this? Is this something we want to continue pursuing? And then if the answer is yes, then we have some more discussion and more decisions to make. So what's everyone's, I know in the last meeting there was viewpoints on both sides of the aisle. I think it's probably worth further discussing those and seeing where we're at.
We have any feedback from the town itself, from the select board?
I don't think Doug can speak up. I don't think the select board has made any recommendations on this. Doug's on the board as a liaison, as a committee member. But I don't think the select board has tried any other input other than putting this group together.
Yeah, he's 100% right. I mean, we haven't discussed it as a board, other than I must have been late to the meeting and got appointed to this subcommittee as the select board liaison. And I'm, once we have some substance, I will gladly report back to the Board of Selectmen our work, just like I do with reporting back activity on the master plan sub, for example. But I think that the select board hasn't taken a position on it, other than the select board authorized a couple of years ago. We authorized the actual creation of this sub under the planning board to look at it, because the law was fairly new. We're starting to see some of it in Southwick, and we need to figure out, what if anything we're going to do with it.
Personally, I think we should follow through with something like this, but I'd be happier if we got some more feedback from people in town. Seems to be a little.
Are you referring to? Are you referring to town officials or?
No, for the townspeople in general,
I did like that some of the concerns that were mentioned in the last meeting are addressed in some of these templates that are already existing, such as having a parking spot for every bedroom. Some of the things that I know you had brought up, concerns about parking on the streets. Some of the other things seem to clean a lot of it up, the inspections, the safety inspections, the registrations. Some of the negatives that were brought forward are pretty much eliminated in some of these bylaws, but still allows it to happen within the boundaries of the town, which I think is addresses the negative things that we did. So that there already seems to be, like, a lot of people have done a lot of work ahead of us. So I think we could, if we can get some feedback as to which direction, and it is the direction to move forward. I mean, personally, I think with a recreational community, I don't know how you don't allow it and having lakes and all that, but you need to confine it and restrict it somewhat, so it doesn't intrude on the public, if you will, spot. And I think these bylaws do that, but I'm sure there's a lot more work to do.
Yeah, I think Kyle, you were the one who kind of were not necessarily in favor of it the last meeting, and you had some concerns. You want to talk about those a little more?
Well, the concerns are the same, and I'm no more in favor of it now after reading, the laws and different sections than I was before. I had firsthand experience with this quite a lot in Northampton and other towns, and you get your party houses, you get lots of trash, you get a good amount of complaints generated from them. So and plus, people are saying the lakes are already overcrowded. You're going to be bringing all this transient traffic because people will be, once they find out they can do it, they will be doing it on a large scale. I believe. I mean, it's a revenue generator, and times aren't that great, so you will find people doing it. And I think it's an enforcement problem. I mean, I don't see where the town has the staff or the resources to enforce a bunch of units scattered all through the community.
Yeah, Diane, you want to say some words?
If I could.
Yeah,
Dan
please.
Gale, 5 Point Grove Road. Couple of things. I know I'm not part of the committee, but I have done.
Excuse me, Randy, can't hear her.
Sorry. Right now, there are only 3 houses or homeowners registered with the state in Southwick. Although there are many more that are listed on Craigslist as having rental properties. Airbnb and VRBO make you register with the state before you can list. They also make you provide contact information for complaints. And the first complaint goes directly to that contact, not necessarily to the town. So neighbors can look up who's renting that and get that information off VRBO or Airbnb. There's a possibility the town could limit the number of allowed renters, like a liquor license. There's only 50 available in town, possibility. And the community impact fee is only for managed properties, which are like apartment houses or formal 2 or 3 or 4 family houses. So I don't think we would be able to apply that one under that, so.
Okay. Thank you. So where do we go from here? We're kind of getting to a point at a crossroads here. We need to make a decision.
Do we have any idea how many units are advertised in town by any chance?
Do you have that thing? How many are advertised right now? Is that what you're asking?
I'm gonna guess on Craigslist, there were 7.
I was gonna say, when I looked, there's like a half a dozen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and timing differs during different seasons, but right now, they talk about the beauty of the winter landscape and stuff.
Mm.
But you have to reach out to find out where those are exactly.
We talked at one time about just having a public hearing, but what, to get public input. What point were we thinking that we ever decided?
I don't think we decided on that. I don't know. Certainly when this gets to planning board, right, that would require a public hearing.
Right.
So,
But there was an outreach activity, was in the Westfield paper.
Talked about it.
Yeah, they did it, I think, before
Yeah,
our first
my
meeting.
name was in it for, I didn't see the article because I don't get the Westfield News, but
Hmm.
there was an article that had my name in it after this first meeting that we had. I don't know what it said.
but that's not a public hearing. That's not a meeting.
No,
that
no,
we-
no, no,
but there
that's
was
just-
like
Oh, I
that's
mean,
just a-
it was an outreach.
Asking
to-
for-
Like more a
asking
public
for-
forum
Yeah.
and certainly anybody on the Zoom here that's not on the committee is more than welcome, I would think, this has been a fairly loose group as far as, taking input or whatever, wherever we get it. But I think we gotta, and, so if anybody wants to speak up, by all means, because the input's welcome, but I think we kind of have to figure out as a group to advise the planning board. I mean, we have a couple ways to go, right? One is ban it, to say, ain't doing it. Some towns and cities have done it. Others have said, regulate it under, we use other bylaws as a guide to go forward. Or do nothing and just let it be how it is right now. So under this, would basically fall under the state law. Because the opinion of the building inspector to date is if it's not in our zoning, it's not allowed. So technically, he views it as not a permitted activity in the town of Southwick. So just as a point of reference. So we have to kind of figure out what we want to do as a committee to recommend to the planning board to then, because the planning board is actually the one who actually would hold the public hearing for a draft zoning bylaw amendment. This board would submit a list of, basically a list of recommendations for said bylaw, and then the planning board would actually put it to form and
But
hold the hearing.
wouldn't we need some kind of public input to steer our draft bylaw?
Well, in the absence of it, we could certainly do that. We could pause here and say, okay, we're gonna advertise some kind of forum and have them, invite anyone to come down or join on
Pros
Zoom,
and cons.
and by all means, we should do that. And we should do that along the way. But also from this board, we can start to have those discussions amongst ourselves now, unless someone were to come in during that public forum with a compelling argument to say one way or another that would sway opinion. But, I heard from, Marcus seems to have an opinion, but judging by what he said, he's kind of in favor of regulating it, right? Just by, he put some criterion around it, but, so he's not saying to ban it, he's saying to regulate it. Utz has asked a lot of questions. I haven't really put forth my opinion yet. Yourself, I think we should kind of figure out where we are and then figure out what's the right way to go from here.
What happens to the people that rent on the sly, like a cash, I can stay at my place for a couple of days, give me $100 and just do it. How do we control that?
You're never
You're never
gonna control that.
100%.
No.
That's just the reality. You try to regulate what you can capture.
Diane, could you give us a list of those people?
Yeah, I can find that. I can
We
get
probably
that.
look ourselves.
It would be interesting to know how many of those people,
It's right on the same site where the regulations are.
it would be interesting to know how many of those people live here and how many are from out of
Oh,
town.
it actually
Owners.
doesn't tell you who they are. You just have their license number or their registration number.
And not the
And
address?
It doesn't even give you the address. It just gives you the registration number and maybe the date registered.
Which makes sense. I mean, even Airbnb, if you're looking, you don't know where it is until after you rent it, right? But
The
and I think-
advertising shows though.
Huh?
The advertising shows.
some, like Craig,
If you have a
some do,
picture,
some
yeah,
don't.
you can go,
Pictures,
I
and
know
if
where
you
that
know where it
picture
is, but if you go on Airbnb, you look at a place and then it says, this nice house or whatever, and it doesn't actually give you the address of it till you rent it. Then it tells you where it is.
Doesn't really mean it's your.
It puts a dot maybe on the link. So this is kind of in this area is where you're at.
correct.
It's not a specific property. It won't tell you that. So if it's your neighbor, you won't know until you actually go and pay.
It must have changed since we looked at it originally.
May have.
Because I can go on Airbnb and find my neighbor's house.
Well, you.
But it
How
doesn't,
much
but
it
does it
costs?
have the address?
Of course,
Oh, okay. Because when I was looking at it,
and how much money it costs,
Hmm.
and when it's available.
Yep.
And regulations, thou shalt not have a fire after 10 o'clock and things like that.
What?
Yeah.
Like
No,
Randy's looking around one now.
everybody's rapidly on their phone right now and around the
It
room
would be
here.
it would be interesting to know how many are there non-resident owners?
Well,
Or if they're.
I think it's
owners who live
situational,
here.
to be honest with you. I don't necessarily agree with Marcus that it should only be a single family home. And I don't know that it's safer or less safe for it to be owner occupied for the person who's renting or occupying, right? There are homes that are, people may have a life situation. They get transferred overseas for 6 months or a year or 2 years or whatever. And rather than sell the home, they use it as they Airbnb it. It's still their home, but it's vacant and they Airbnb it.
The easiest way to do that is to do a lease.
Correct.
Instead of
I get it, but
Airbnb is expensive much more expensive than a lease.
correct. But it also has the potential to be more income producing than a lease, right? So the two sides of it, right?
Yeah.
And it's also harder to lease a house I'm just guessing, right? To lease a house in Southwick than it would be someplace else. Just by my guess, by the location, and especially along the lake where it has the potential to be a much more lucrative venture to do a short-term rental. You know, I find it, to me,
I think it's your neighbor.
Yeah.
It doesn't say the address. It just
Okay.
But-
shows it.
It's there.
it's also interesting to me that people that rent a room in a house. So if you have a 3-bedroom house and it's, you know, one person lives there and they literally rent the other 2 bedrooms in the house out, and you share the common kitchen and bathrooms, and that's the business model. That's what's happening.
Just for 31 days or less.
For 31 days or less, right? So, and I'm sure in Northampton, that was probably even, you know, more prevalent than it is here. I mean, I looked around, you know, and seen, you know, in the area where they are doing that, where you can rent an entire house, you can, you know.
Oh, yeah, all kinds of options.
Yeah. And I'm sure Craigslist is probably even more Wild West than Airbnb. Airbnb and Vrbo have kind of been under the microscope a little bit with this whole short-term rental platform thing came about. And, you know, that was the genesis of all this regulation. The Craigslist stuff's been going on for what, 20 years? You know?
But when I was there, Doug, I actually saw people buying houses to do this to them.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. And we talked about that in the first meeting we had, where, you know, in certain areas, not Southwick today, but in certain areas where pressure's being put on rental stock because people are buying, you know, units and using them. It's more lucrative to have them be Airbnbs than to have them be traditional rental properties.
Right.
And so it created actually a kind of a housing crunch, if you will, for people who were
But
looking.
that's still a rental property.
In a different way, though, because it can't be for more than 30 days. Someone is looking to move somewhere for, you know, and sign a 1-year lease. There, you know, there was a dearth of properties because they were all being utilized as short-term rentals. Or a majority, I shouldn't say all, a
More
lot
money.
of them. Oh, yeah.
More money.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But
I think the key is registration.
Right.
That they be registered and then have inspections so that the town can be sure that everything is on the up and up.
I agree with you. And, you know, the fire chief mentioned in the first meeting, and it was concerning to me, and I've seen it on Airbnb too, is that, you know, you rent the basement and it's not a suitable living space. It may be converted to a living space, but it's not a safe living space, even for 1 day or 2 days or 31 days, right? It
Right.
might not have the right egress or the windows or what have you to make that work if, God forbid, something were to happen.
Yeah.
But from what I'm hearing from, other than from Kyle, is that, you know, regulation and or registration and inspection is probably a direction to go in. But by the way, there's a hand up here. Jacqueline, I don't want to mess up your last name.
It's Sine.
There you go. I was going to butcher it, so I'm glad I didn't.
Go ahead, Jacqueline.
No, I just, you know, being, I have a house that I own in Southwick. I have the house that I first purchased down on the lakes, and I have been renting it out, and it's been more long-term and had someone in there for long periods of time. But in times that things change and everything, I don't want to be in a situation where if I have a tenant who comes in and is in there for a month and then they, for whatever reason, move out, then I don't want to start being in a situation where if I bring someone in as a tenant, and right now to bring people in on a lease is sometimes worse now because of the time that, you know, rental agents are telling me, oh yeah, get people in there, and then all of a sudden people stop paying their rent. So it can be just as hard where you can't get someone to lease with you. You end up on a more month-to-month rental basis. So it just gets harder. So I did understand like some of the stuff where Pat was saying, like, yeah, I think having a 1-day rental is kind of insane if you ask me, but I don't know how we as a town make that stop happening. You know what I mean?
Thank you. Yeah, that happens, I mean, just face to face or, you know, through social media, direct contacts, you know, I mean, we'll never see those one a day, you know, rentals come through any town agency, right? You'll never see it.
And I think we've had more trouble, at least on my end, with rents that are long-term rents that refuse to pay their rent and refuse to leave. And the property deteriorates and all the things that go with that versus something that might be short-term and there's always a turnover, there's always maintenance, there's always things where people aren't going to rent it again if it's, you know, a bad property.
Right now, the enforcement is not existing. The bylaw said thou shalt not have short-term rentals. And there are short-term rentals which are not being regulated or enforced.
So who would be that enforcement authority as of today? Would that be,
I understood the building inspector.
How do you track them down? How do you find them? Do I play detective and call people on Craigslist? I mean, we gotta kind of do this in a practical way.
My neighbors and I signed a complaint and put it in the hands of the building inspector.
And I am the building inspector, and I also turn that over to the town attorney for action.
He has been doing nothing for several years.
Well, I've only been here for a short time. So during the period I've been here, we had COVID and I couldn't even take that party to court because there were no court sessions.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
It should have been done sooner.
Yeah.
We went to the planning board after, this is the whole planning board, after the state regulations came out. And the state wanted to have it registered so that they could collect an excise tax or some kind of tax on it. And we went to the planning board and we said, we would like a decision on this. And they came back and said, the select board will have to approve. And we went to talk to the select board, and the select board says, we're going to turn it over to a lawyer. And that's where it sits, with the lawyer.
is that where it still sits, Kyle, with the
To my knowledge, yes. Yeah, and then we discuss having this committee to see if there's a way to regulate it. And, you know, my last talk with, I think it was Attorney Bagdalene, actually, that was handling this one. And it was discussed to try to come up with some bylaw to regulate it so you could enforce it better.
Okay.
I think that's why we're here, isn't it? Just to put a handle on this thing, get it some
Well, I don't.
parameters, so we can go one way or the other.
We're here for that reason, but the thing is, you're not going to get less of these with regulation. You're going to get a lot more of these. So you have, like we say, 9, 10, 12 of them right now on Craigslist that are, you know, doing it, and they know they're not supposed to be doing it. You're going to have many, many, many more. And some of them will do it the right way and some of them won't. So the question is, who goes out on all these calls that you're apt to get?
Diane,
It seems to me that first you would need to define what short-term is versus long-term, or, you know, living rental versus recreational rental. Have a registration period. Once this were adopted, a registration period for people to pony up. In the future, violators would be found out by complaint. And first notice, they get a notice that they're in violation. They get to register and do it right. Register their contact information for complaints, etc. Second notice for that same offender might be another slap on the hand. Third time, it's a fine. And further enforcement. I think once people know it's not a free-for-all, enforcement would not be an issue. Certainly not by the hundreds.
Yeah, I don't see hundreds of short-term rentals in town either. I mean, I would, you know,
And if you.
any one given time.
If you make them have to go through the registration, and it's a $10 registration fee or something, you make them have to go through the inspection, and it's, you know, a nominal amount for inspection, it kind of legitimizes the situation and makes them realize it's serious. Legitimizes the rentor to take it seriously.
Mhm.
And then it lets them freely publicize and, you know, rent the heck out of the place. Correctly. Instead of doing it on the slide.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think for the, I mean, other than Kyle, I think we're all in general consensus, you know, approve it with some conditions, regulations.
And then the tax and the excise tax and the fees you don't pay for a trip out for a complaint by someone. I'm not looking for that job.
I wouldn't mind hearing from more people in the public as well. We talked about that. I don't know, Doug, you know, we do have that online survey. Maybe put something out there, you know, maybe a survey through that forum and just kind of get some feedback from the public. We've only had, you know, it's our third meeting. We've had Diane and Jacqueline, and I think that's about it for public comments.
We had, well, we had,
Amanda.
yeah, we had the
Yeah.
Amanda.
person who was up at Westover,
military,
right?
yeah.
Came in.
That's Amanda.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
I forgot.
thank you.
Yeah, who spoke, you know, kind of what she's thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe for the next meeting, we can come up with maybe a way to reach out to the public.
Yeah.
And get some more feedback.
Yep.
Randy, just a comment, Marcus Phelps here. I think when you do put out the survey, provide some information, general information about it, and the fact that it's illegal now, and then also include the definition, at least as much as you want now, what a short-term rental is, so people understand that someone who's leasing a home for 2 or 3 or 6 months is fine. That's not illegal. It's the less than 31 day or 31 days or less that is what is being considered as short term.
Definitions are very helpful.
Okay. How about this? So if I give everyone some homework assignment to maybe generate some questions that we could add to the survey and bring that to the next meeting. How's that sound?
Fine.
3 to 5 questions per person. How's that? And we'll go from there.
You want us to submit them
Submit
a
them to
week
me,
before?
a week before to me, yep, and then I will compile them and put them in a list. We can talk about them at the next meeting. All right.
Mhm.
Anything else on the discussion? I think this was a good start here.
Is there anyone else on Zoom that had any feedback that they wanted to provide?
I wanted to make a comment on Diane's that we're a recreation community. We have a campground on College Highway. When we were working with the 250th, we went to 2 different places. We went to Sopanowski property on Mort Vining Road and the disc golf out on Fred Jackson as possible places for people to camp for a weekend. So that if we needed more space for recreation for people like coming to the motocross, something like that. Those are two other places that could be investigated for using for the motocross that you might not have known about. You know, the only reason I know is because I was on the 250th committee. But I mean, there's three places that they could stay other than being on the lakes. So just a comment.
But then we could advertise if we had this bylaw, that those were available.
Yeah,
Randy, we're talking about that. I know, Sodom Mountain's been sold, Sodom Mountain Campground's been sold. And people approached the board about doing year-long rental, which I don't think is gonna fly, but just to let you know, there's somebody else new in town on that situation. There again, maybe for a motocross type situation, that could be available also.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that. That's another campground.
Okay, anything else before we move on? All right, next item I have is new business. Anybody have anything new to talk about before?
It's
No.
85 in Florida.
No.
Dick, every time I talk, you tell me that.
Supposed to snow tomorrow.
Send me a picture.
The only other one thing I want to bring up is we are still short one resident participant of this committee. I know there are 2 names that have been submitted to the planning board, and the planning board still needs to act on submitting one to this committee. So still waiting on that.
But, you know, why don't you contact John, make sure he gets put in for the next planning board meeting, which is coming up soon.
Yes, I'll remind them.
Thank you.
Let's see, moving on in routine business, we have minutes from our last 2 meetings to accept. First being January 25th, 2022. Those were sent out last week.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor, we're gonna do a roll call here.
Aye.
Scott, aye, Russ Anderson.
Aye.
Rainey Brown, aye. Doug Mogul.
Aye.
Tom Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Nick Kutzinger.
Aye.
And Pat Odiorn.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And how about approval of the minutes from 2/8/2022?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor, Kyle Scott,
Aye.
Russ Anderson,
Aye.
Randy Brown, aye. Doug Mogul,
Aye.
Tom Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Dick Kutzinger.
Aye.
Pat Odiorn.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, next meeting. We have, at our last meeting, we decided to meet on is this the first? This is the second Tuesday of the month. So that would be April 12th.
Randy, if you're gonna planning board, they got a bunch of meetings coming up back to back.
I know you have, I think, the next 3 Tuesdays, right, Dick?
I believe so, yes.
15, 22, and 29.
Like the old days on the planning board, meeting every week.
Dick, do you typically meet on the first or the second, or first and third, or second and fourth Tuesdays?
I think second, fourth, I believe.
I don't know why you're not meeting today, though, because today's the second Tuesday.
Marcus could
I
answer
think,
that.
I think the chairman is out of town. I could be wrong, but I think there was some discourse about that.
Oh, so that might be conflict moving forward if it's the second Tuesday?
Well,
Marcus, are you still on? That's okay.
he ran.
Marcus would know because he's
Yeah.
on the planning board.
He signed off.
When you check with John in the morning, let us know.
Well, I'd like to get it done tonight here.
That, are you thinking second and third? They did?
No, it's either the first and third or the second and fourth.
I have an idea.
I think it's the first and third. So I'm looking at
I think you're right, but putting a couple other meetings in there, Randy, just to play catch up on a couple items.
Yeah, this month is special.
But how about if we met, you pick a winner, but make the meeting at 6 o'clock?
Yeah, I like that idea.
Because then you get out of the way for the planning board at 7, and keeps our discussion within 50 minutes.
Yeah, we can do that, but I'm looking at, so December, January, February, the meetings are the 1st and the 3rd.
I think,
Tuesdays.
yeah, that's probably correct.
So,
But they're stacked in April because they've got all their
great.
public hearings for their bylaws for the ATM have to be submitted by town meeting, which is the 17th of May.
So let's meet on 6 o'clock then on the 12th. Right,
What day, Randy? I'm sorry. When?
Tuesday, April 12th.
Okay.
At 6? At 6.
At 6 PM, yep.
Yep.
And we got 55 minutes.
And we could always meet someplace else so that the planning board can set up their stuff.
Yeah.
We'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the selectmen's conference room we could use or the one downstairs.
Could we move an hour if we had to one of the rooms?
Oh, yeah. Maybe the rooms will all be done by then. They're supposed to have all that stuff coming.
Mhm.
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you all.